Thank you so much, Dr. Raj, for coming on board and talking to us about the very important issue of vaping among children. How prevalent is vaping among children at your practice and in the community?
The vaping is it is getting very common problem. And if you look at probably before COVID, it wasn't a very common issue in Australia particularly, but in America, definitely it was an issue. But during COVID, because of all the restrictions and fear of getting infected and non-availability of vaping and its liquid itself, the incidence and prevalence has reduced down during COVID. But particularly in Australia, in last 2 years after COVID, it has increased quite dramatically. So if we look into the absolute incidence, the children between 18 to 24 years of age, nearly 26.1% of children in Australia, according to the recent survey, have vape. And if we use between 14 to 17 years of age, 9.6%. So which is a quite high number in a very young age. More than the number which worries me is the vaping happening in a very young age, very tender age, where we don't expect children to smoke because smoking is banned. As a child, they are not allowed to go and buy a cigarette. And as a business, we are not allowed to sell cigarettes to less than 18 years of age. And legally, it is banned. But because there is a legal restriction on selling vaping to children less than 18 years of age. And that's why the prevalence, particularly in children less than 18 years of age, is been increasing very rapidly. And that's the most important and concerning point to me as a pediatrician and as, of course, as a father too.
So, can you give us an overview of the potential dangers of vaping amongst children, particularly the short term and the long term effects?
Yeah. First thing I think to understand is the basic myth about the vaping. The reason why our young children are going more toward getting attracted to vaping is they believe that it is harmless. Because it's been the main thing which makes the vapes in that is e-liquid. E-liquid, unfortunately, it is very uncontrolled again. There is no limited minimum standard of, like in smoking, we know there's a minimum standard. In alcohol, we know there's a minimum required standard there. But in vaping, because there is no legal and standard there. So what is in this vaping, the vape material or the e-liquid is very dodgy and dubious here. Though claim to be that it is all flavored things, but it is not all the vapes we see in the market, and when it was tested are non-nicotine. So they are all having, or majority of them having nicotine. The first thing to understand, the risk of vaping is if it's contained nicotine, then the risk of nicotine is as equal as it is from smoking. So whether it's a bad smell in the mouth, whether it is causing irritation, whether it's a smoker cough, whether it is increasing your blood pressure, whether it's causing increasing your asthma, whether it's causing bronchiolitis, your heart attack, and a lot of smoking induced diseases are linked with. And the similar risk in children here and in adults because of the nicotine content of that. And more importantly, because we don't know what is the component of these e-liquids, what are the constituents of these e-liquids, then there is a more associated universal and widespread risk to children and adults. Because studies have found that it contains formaldehyde, acetaldehyde, which is a cancer-inducing chemicals. It contains THC, which is similar to like marijuana. It contains certain metals like nickel, lead, copper, tin, which can be nephrotoxic, like damaging to your kidney and liver, and can cause cancer. There are many other different type of chemical, nearly more than 7,000 toxic chemical material has been seen, which we see in our nail polish, the varnish, the petrol, fuel. Similar chemical has been seen in this. And as I said, because it's a very uncontrolled, unregulated market, and anybody can put anything in the e-liquid and sells it without any label being put it on. And that's how this is likely to cause a lot of damage to the body, starting from the lungs. Like as I said, it increases the asthma and chronic lung disease. But for the children, more importantly, what I'm worried about is it can lead to headache. It can affect your cognitive ability, concentration in the class. It can affect your ability to learn. It can affect your brain growth in a long run. It can also lead to cancer. Then on the top of that, can become a carcinogenic. It is addictive to nicotine, and we are more likely to having a flavored vapor now, and more likely to have smoking as a cigarette smoking as adults.
So, do the presence of these extra chemicals, apart from just nicotine, make it more addictive?
These chemicals don't make it more addictive, as far as the best research so far is known. But these are more toxic than the nicotine itself in terms of widespread causing damage to our lungs. I'll tell you one example. In 2020, in America, 68 people died because of vaping.
And these were adults. Were they adults?
Yeah, this all children and adults. Not only adult, it's a children and adult. So 68 people died, 2,685 people who are admitted in the hospital from the lung disease, which is known as a short term is known as the EVALI, EVALI. So that is e-liquid and vapor induced or associated lung disease, which leads to widespread damage to the lungs, and 68 people died, and rest is the damage was so much they were oxygen dependent for many, many months, and then finally they recovered. So this is the damage happened because of number of chemicals being present in that, leading to toxic damage. There's another the chemical which is known as what we call is a vitamin E acetate. If you remember, there is whenever we go for a movie, you eat popcorn. And when we eat popcorn, there is a buttery smell or butter sort of a thing you feel also in the hand, and you also you taste in your mouth. And it's not a butter. It is a diacetyl chemical. And similar diacetyl chemical is found in this e-liquid. And that's also what we know as a popcorn disease. And the name has come as a popcorn disease or popcorn lungs, and has come up from this because this chemical is initially used in popcorn, and it has caused damage to people, those who are working in a popcorn making industry, because the constant inhalation of this chemical goes to their lung, and it has caused to the lung changes, and it is named as a popcorn disease or popcorn lung. And your facial expression shows that you're quite surprised with it.
I am surprised.
So that's why there's a more worry of this extra chemical toxin material fumes which is there, and is likely to cause more damage to the lungs and widespread to the other organ of the body. It can lead to your brain damage, it can lead to your strokes, it can lead to your kidney damage. So there is almost every organ of the body can be damaged, and of course it's a carcinogenic, leading to cancer.
You've quoted the statistics from America. Has Australia come out with any such statistics on the number of deaths or any such numbers?
Look, because this was all pre-COVID, 1919 and 2020, 2019 and 2020, COVID has reduced the significance incidence. And number of public health steps has been taken in America, and that has significantly reduced the it created awareness all over the country, and after that, the death incidence has reduced significantly in America. And that knowledge has been transferred to in Australia too. And the chemical which we didn't know initially that these are the chemical which is causing damage to the lungs and purposely has been taken out from these e-liquids. So overall, that's why this death rate has significantly reduced. But in Australia, there are few deaths has been reported, very one or two deaths in my best knowledge, and it is very limited number. But because Australia is always, you can say, laid behind and laid back as compared to America in most of the things, and that some way it is good for us because these dangerous things comes late, and the knowledge also come to us along with this dangerous thing to take the precaution steps, and that's why the death rate in Australia overall is very, very less. And because this chemical has been removed, and we already started the public, awareness campaign much earlier as compared to America.
So how should parents, caregivers, or authorities approach the topic of vaping, amongst children?
I think the first and foremost important thing for everyone, as a parent, as a doctor, as a politician, the most important thing for controlling any disease is the public health awareness. Creating the awareness in our community about the facts of e-vaping, or vaping or e-cigarettes, what are the harmful things it can cause. And this awareness should be both in the school and also in for the
Among
parents.
families. Hmm.
So first and most important thing is getting this information, what vaping is, what can it damage it can cause, how my child can get addicted to this, and then we can take the precautions and steps on that. Sitting with a child one-to-one and having a discussion about the vaping. And sometimes the indirect discussions would be, oh, have you seen anybody in your school being vaping? Have you seen anybody in your school and your class being in trouble because of vaping?
Mm.
Have you been a part of that group, children, those who grow, vaping? Have you seen anybody selling, e-cigarettes close to your school or in your, yard? So these are the having simple discussions at that stage. And then you're talking to the direct level to your child and saying, these are the important knowledge you need to have. Linking your child to that authentic websites, like your All Children Hospital website. This is a parental and a teen information sheet about vaping. So giving them a right factual information about, this is more about the prevention, so that the child is not getting addicted to vaping, and how they can avoid if somebody is approaching to them and say, oh, you want to have a taste of it first time. That may be the beginning for your child.
Yep. So, okay, are there any recommended treatment or intervention for children who are addicted to vaping?
Look, because it's all new area, and we research is.
Oh, wait, one sec. So when you say new, you mean it's come into the realm of, research, study, and all of that only recently in terms of the timeline? Since when?
Yes, it is a new in that way. It has been in the market for probably more than a decade, but it was never a public health issue or concerns. As more recently, it has been infiltrated down to children when it started happening. That's why it's getting more worried.
Mhm.
And why it is happening, I think it's very important for me to give this information to why it is affecting more children than adults. Number one, most of the e-cigarettes are very colorful. They are not in a plain packaging. They comes in a different colors, which is generally very attractive to children. Number two, there is no legislation, as I said, for selling the e-cigarettes. So any 14-year-old, 16-year-old cannot go and buy a cigarette, but can buy e-cigarette. So it's easily accessible for them.
Okay.
Number three, they are selling it as it is a flavored non-addictive, and it comes in a various flavors, and which is also and very sort of addicted to this age group. That okay, it's a chocolate flavor, vanilla flavor, strawberry flavor. So it comes in a various flavor. So that flavor is very addictive. Other thing is myth. As I said, it is considered as it is safe and harmless,
Harmless, yes.
and that's why they think, oh, cigarette is addictive, but e-cigarette is not addictive. So I'm just doing for fun, having fun with other children. So look cool as my other peer group also. So that's the reason they are getting more and more addictive, and more children, young brain, and getting addicted to that. And it is penetrating not only the secondary school, it's penetrating down to the primary school also, and that's the worry point for all of us.
So, which means, so the point is that e-cigarettes are equally as harmful as normal cigarettes, and I think it has a lot to do also with the marketing of this product, and that's why children are getting addicted, isn't it? I think we haven't touched upon, what I asked just before this on intervention and treatment of children addicted to vaping.
Okay. Look, I mean, we were talking about that it is a new thing is in that way because it's just recently has become a public health issue, and so the research is still at large level is going on, and I'm pretty sure we'll get more and more idea how it is more causing long-term damage to our body organs. But whatever knowledge so far we have about the strategies we know is the similar strategy what we use for quitting smoking. Like if we think my child is addicted to vaping, having a good discussions with your child and talking about vaping is important thing. Number one, knowing the what content is in the e-vaping are using, is that a nicotine content or non-nicotine content? Because if it is a nicotine content, then the pathway would be you need to use probably maybe alternative to nicotine would be like using nicotine patches or lozenges or gummy. That could be one way of alternative to use so that they can get away from vaping itself. Sitting with a child along with a psychologist or school counselor would be a good idea. Making a certain goals. What are the goals you want to achieve and when you want to achieve? Like, don't make it achieve, okay, I want to stop vaping by end of 2024. That I think is a very vague type of a goal to achieve. You need to say, okay, I'm having a vaping, probably you can say 20 times a day. In my next 1 month, I want to reduce it down. And next week, I want to reduce it down to 15 times. After next week, I'll reduce to 12 times. So make a short, achievable targets. Number 3 is, of course, involving your psychologist, pediatrician, and look for other damage it has caused to your body and what can be done for that, depending upon the damage, and that can be cured in that way. And helpline would also be very useful in these cases. To talking to the more expert in the quit line would be useful. Looking into the alternative way of keeping yourself busy so you can forget about vaping, like going for exercise, involving in sports activity. Because when you stop vaping, you're going to have a similar type of withdrawal symptoms, of craving symptoms. So to avoid that craving, you need some degree of distraction for something. So keeping yourself busy is important. Avoiding temptations and triggers are important thing. So if you vape with a group of friends, so moving away from the group of friends would be useful because whenever you go over there, they are going to give you another temptation. Oh, come on.
Peer pressure. Basically,
peer pressure. So avoiding that situations are always very important. Then, of course, our Indian background, using a yoga, meditation, and a deep breathing exercise always help.
Okay. All right. Last question. Uh, how do you think healthcare professionals, parents and schools, come together or work together to address this issue of vaping among children?
I think more importantly at this stage, we need a national program, and which I think more likely going to happen in next couple of months' time. And I know last month our health minister, state and health minister, Honorable Mark Butler, had a meeting and made sort of a commitment to make certain changes. In health budget, also some amount of the funding has been kept for the national campaign of vaping. So that this a national campaign is going to be all over Australia, and that we, of course, we have learned from our smoking campaign. If you remember, if we scratch our knowledge and brain and you see, Australia is the only country where the smoking campaign has worked so well in whole of the world in a positive way, and smoking rate has reduced significantly. Cigarette was plain packaging nowadays. You don't get in any sort of a multiple color attractive packaging. E-cigarette should be similar way as a plain packaging, not in a multicolor. Like as I said, this e-cigarette comes in a very multicolor. So it needs to be a absolutely plain package. Single use cannot be available in the market, and it is considered to be banned and illegal, which is going to happen most likely as far as the meeting we remember. There need to be a minimum standard of the e-liquid. So what could be the content of that e-liquid? So the customer and children and parents are aware of what they are buying.
Okay.
So these type of
These are the recommendations on the part of the manufacturers and also the government's push to have these stringent requirements, isn't it? But surely a child who's going to buy, this is not going to look for it. So suppose there has to be a more, what should I say, stringent way of enforcing this, isn't it?
Look, it is stringent, but there is no doubt, as I said, when we look at the smoking campaign. So one is of the national policy. Second thing is awareness campaign. One is the political move for making a strict policies, and second thing is making people public aware of doing the national campaign. And second part, this is what I was talking about, the first part of the what needs to be done from the government and the national level in consultations with the health professionals, because health professionals are the one who will give advice to the national politician and policy maker that these are the national standard needs to be there. These are the national standard for the minimum standard volume component needs to be there. And then it comes to the awareness to the general public, and that also needs to be a national campaign of including children and adolescents being a part of that campaign, creating a story on national media. But here the changes needs to be done, what I believe, as compared to the smoking campaign, because when the smoking campaign was done, there was only national TVs. But now these teenagers and adolescents watch less TV, and even if they watch more on their phone and the social medias.
Yeah,
Like TikTok,
yeah,
Snapchat,
yeah. And we're talking about, I know, and we're talking about this bracket of age. They're not into watching television, so it has to be a more social media drive, isn't it?
Exactly. So that campaign drive needs to be changed, and it needs to be more infiltrating into the age appropriate area. Like Snapchat is more for between 13 to 15 or maximum 18 years of age. So if we have to reach to that level, we need to go to Snapchat, we need to go to Instagram, we need to go to Facebook, we need to go to all TikTok media and put this national campaign.
Yeah. Anyway, anything else that you wanted to add?
Look, I want to add extra thing is that sometimes when we smoke, we always talk about passive smoking. Like what happens to, if I'm smoking, what happened to a pregnant lady next to me and a child next to me and the person who having asthma next to me? So does Does vaping cause a similar degree of damage or issues?
Hmm.
And if you ask a short answer, I would say yes, it does cause the similar issues, because if it contains the nicotine which is coming out of the vapor is causing the similar degree of damage and effect on as a passive smoking to anybody's stomach.
Hmm.
And probably if the e-liquid contain all the toxic material what we talked about, it is going to cause us damage too. Though e-liquid does not make smoke, it does not make smoke. It can make the vapes, which is not the water vapor. It's the vape of coming from the e-liquid, which is, ignited by the battery in the e-cigarette. So passive smoking impact on children is the same. And that I believe should be, that's why we all try at our level best as health professionals, as a family, as a community, at the national level, to stop this happen as much as possible, because it is causing a lot of damage to our adults and our children.
Yeah.
And they are the future of our country.
Very true. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Raj, for throwing a light on this very important topic of vaping among children. And we'll catch up soon again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.